Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get pre-orders of all the upcoming Force of Will sets, as well as releases of previous sets after they come out. TCGPrime.com with over 100,000 Force of Will singles, as well as out-of-print boxes from the past, and TCG accessories, as well as FowlLibrary.com, a wonderful resource for deck lists, article discussions, and more. Check them out at FowlLibrary.com, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer member Vite Ramen. Thank you for your support. Class is in session.
Hey there, rulers. Welcome back to the deck profile with yours truly, Paul Reisman. Today, we are going to be taking a look at my recent Eldorado Lumia list that I piloted against Josh Mosdar, the bardiest bard, in his Zeus Alice Palace list. This was a super fun match, but this was even a more fun deck to create. I went through a couple of iterations, and this is by no means the end of this deck at all, but I just want to give you a little bit of an intro, so let's just get right into it. Before we get started though, don't forget that you can buy singles from ccgprime.com. That is a really good place to get all of your Force of Will singles. And shoutouts to Dan for also hosting the Wanderer tournaments where I pilot these decks. It's awesome. Check him out, ccgprime.com. And don't forget that also Odyssey Games has pre-orders for Dual Cluster. Not only the structure decks, but also Dual Cluster Set 1 Game of Gods. So that stuff's going to be coming out here pretty quick. Make sure you check right now because they might be out very soon. Check it out. Links are in the description down below, but let's get right into the deck profile, lest I forget anything else. So first, we're going to be talking about one of the best rulers this game has ever produced, Lumia the Fated Rebirth. Now, back in the day, this card used to be used on the front side only, because that flicker effect at the end of turn, remove target rested resonator you control from the game, then put it into its owner's field. The flicker effect, as you might hear me saying all throughout this video, this is so strong. The way this card was used back in the day was with Captain Hook the Pirate. That card is banned in Wanderer, so we had to look for something else, and of course I chose Eldorado Pearlshine. Probably one of the coolest and one of the cards that I hate the most because Jeremy always whoops my butt with it. So let's get into the main deck here. Of course, I'll be using the flip side as well, so we'll be talking about this once I get down to the card that is listed in that text, and then we can talk more about how I use this card on its flip side. So first and foremost, the old school Lumia decks would always use mana dorks, typically something like a Sacred Elf or an Elvish Priest. However, Eldorado's in white, so I didn't want to have to use green, so I opted to play Flute and Acolyte of the Sun. Specifically, Flute is probably the best, not only because she has barrier and therefore is super sticky and really hard to get rid of, but in addition, she can pump your Resonators by putting a +1/+1 counter on them. But then if you have her in hand and you just don't have a real reason to put more on the field, you can just blow up all J Resonators without +1/+1 counter. So she's a good comeback mechanic in that, and I love my comeback mechanics in this game. Of course, Acolyte of the Sun is the same thing, just a little bit weaker, and doesn't have any flashy effects, a little bit easier to get rid of, but in the early game they tend to stick around a little bit easier. Next, the most expensive card in this list is Dark Alice Rabbit Princess. I just needed to draw for my stuff, basically. I don't know what you could replace this with if you don't have this card. This is just one of those cards where I think the deck really did need just a little bit of additional draw power because it doesn't float into blue very easily, but this card is super good. I highly recommend if you can ever get a playset of this card, please do it. Also, Force of Will Company, please just make Wanderer promos of the DBV supers that we just never got access to again. It would be super great. One of my other favorite cards in this list is Charlotte, Inheritor of the 7th Power, basically turning your entire sideboard into a toolbox of 1-drop white chance, and that includes Yggdrasil's Grace, which is a good way to flicker Pearlshine or flicker any of your other cards that you just need to be able to get additional effects off of. One of the best cards back in the day to use with Lumia is, of course, our Vengolf 3 Lumia Saint of Creation. She's a saint. We get it. She's always going to be a saint. Lumia is just a really, really good, pure character. And this is just a good way of extending your hand. So basically you play her, you remove 3 cards from the top of your deck from the game, and then you get to use them as long as Lumia is on the field. And you get to do 3 if you're playing Lumia. Spoiler alert, we are playing Lumia as a as a ruler, excuse me, and J ruler. So this card is super good for that reason. And I do have a lot of 1-drops, things you can pay 1 for to get things removed from your opponent's side of the field or just stop them from doing things. So she's pretty good for that, and a lot of quick cast stuff works well with her too. 4 was a little bit too clunky, so I'm only playing 3. Next we have Napoleon Bonaparte himself eating an apple for some random reason. But when this boy comes into the field, you get 1 of each gem, and they all go into your item zone if you're not familiar with how gems work. And you get a light, fire, water, wind, and darkness gem, and you can remove them for a variety of abilities, including destruction of additions, damage to J Resonators or to your opponent, drawing cards, making additional will, and making your opponent discard. This card is amazing, and the reason you want to flicker this is so that way you can make your opponent discard multiple cards, make additional will, draw cards, etc. This thing felt super comfortable to swing with, etc. I love Eldorado Pearlshine, and I also hate it when he's used against me. Next, we have a good way of getting rid of your opponent's tokens, because we live in a meta that is post the 7th, so we're going to be having a lot of Belial tokens. Ultra Dragon, really solid, good control card in a lot of ways. It's a 10/10. Whenever a Resonator is put into the field on your opponent's side of the field without being played from the hand, y'all just burn that for 20 damage. It's a Slifer the Sky Dragon effect that I absolutely love. It's got flying, it's got barrier blue-black. It's going to be kind of hard to get rid of in the game. And he just seems super, super good for that reason. So I played 3 of him. Originally, I was playing Exorcist Mage over this card. Don't do that. You will get rid of your own stuff because of Lumia's mandatory flicker effect. Ultra Dragon is a good way of getting around that. Plus, he's an additional boss monster, being able to swing in for a pretty good chunk of damage. 10 damage is nothing to laugh at. So this thing is pretty useful, and it can help you get around some of your opponent's more ridiculous stuff. Plus, it works in conjunction with Lumia's flip side, because if you flicker your opponent's stuff and they come into the field, you just burn them for 20 damage, turning Lumia into a removal, which is super funny. Last few cards here in the Resonator lineup are Hunting Angel. This is a good way of getting around something like Girion, but also it's a good flicker target, getting rid of your opponent's stuff and then gaining life as a result of that. And then Nyarlathotep, the Crimson Radiance. This card is pretty good. Really the only reason I'm using it is to be able to flip Lumia into her J-Ruler side so that she has Imperishable and Drain. And I see myself flipping Lumia a little bit more, mostly because she's a really good body. She does really good things on the field, and like I just said, she works in conjunction with Ultra Dragon. She can do some pretty nutty stuff by just removing your own stuff and having it enter your own field, so she can flicker while also being offensive, which I thought was really underutilized when she was first out, but we had no reason to do that back then. Now we kind of do. So Nyarlathotep is mostly there for that particular reason. Next up, we have Dispelling Stone to get rid of my opponent's additions like Diversity Town, Belial's Castle, other things that just hit the field. Specifically Demonic Worlds too. Like Demonic Worlds just need to get off the field as fast as possible. So Dispelling Stone's good for that. Also, you're drawing a card. It's a 1-drop, so it's really good with Charlotte, Inheritor of the 7th Power. This card does exist in the sideboard as well, so effectively I'm playing 3 Dispelling Stones. And with 3 Charlottes, I'm playing essentially 5 of this card, which is pretty great. Interdimensional Escape is an oldie but a goodie, a good way of getting rid of a bunch of cards on your opponent's side of the field if you are very limited on your own. So this card is really solid for that reason. Schrödinger's Cry is another form of removal, just in case my opponent gets a little bit too aggressive, specifically with something like Virgil. This card is really good for that reason. Road to the Sacred Queen. This card is really solid, especially against Virgil, because then it, you know, combines with Schrödinger's Cries. You can just get rid of it. But this card is super good, especially against things like tokens, just being able to punish your opponent for playing a bunch of stuff, and then they have to wait a turn before they can do anything with it. Next, you have Amadeus Holy Spear. I'm playing 3 of this, mostly because my meta at TCGprime.com, the store, has a lot of people who like Fallen Angel Rulers, especially the token generating stuff, like Choir of Angels and Belial in general, and Rival Rule as a card. This card is just really good for stopping God's Arts as well, so I figured this card was going to be a little bit more important, although if you are not somebody who feels like you need 3 of this card, playing Yggdrasil's Grace in place of this is probably just fine. This is one of those flexible points in the actual deck itself. So you're probably wondering, how am I playing all these Ultra Dragons when this is mostly a white deck? Well, I'm playing basically 10 Heat Rays. 2 of them are right here, 4 more of them are here, and the last 4 are Heat Rays. But Awakened Magic Stone is really good. If you flip your Lumia using the stone, it recovers, so basically your Lumia is free. That's super helpful and super great, so this card exists for that reason, and it's, you know, it doesn't ping me because I have Lumia. Magic Stone of Heat Ray speaks for itself. I'm playing 1 Yggdrasil's Grace in the sideboard, effectively with Charlotte. It's 3 copies in the main, if you want to look at it that way. So I kind of saw Yggdrasil's Grace being a really good combo card, but if I ever got put on the back foot, it was just dead. So I relegated it to the sideboard, although because of Amadeus Holy Spear being kind of dead in my matchup against Josh, this card might see more main deck play depending on the future. Next, we have 1 Charlotte's Light Transformation Magic, again to work with Charlotte. Good way of robbing your opponent's stuff, like Belial, with all of their different abilities. Intimidation to stop Resonator attacks to my face, to give all of my stuff Eternal, Awakening of 0, a way of getting tokens on my +1/+1 counters on my Resonators while also getting rid of one of my opponent's cards. Dispelling Stone, again to get rid of additions. Separation of Fates to essentially do what Light's transformation magic's gonna do, but it allows me to also draw a card, which is nice. Schrödinger's Cry for more removal. 7th Boon, just in case my opponent is going absolutely ham with the God's Arts and the tokens. And then 1 final Charlotte, Inheritor of the 7th Power, to just give me additional copies of all of these cards in my sideboard in case my opponent really just needs that extra one to do things. Now, of course, I can't play Exorcist Mage in this deck because I get screwed if I do. So I'm playing Morning Angel instead. Just gets rid of Castle of Beatrice's, if your opponent's targeting something engraved, to bring it back, with, you know, Part of True Power, or, you know, like, who knows, right? There could be any number of cards that target stuff in the grave. Morning Angel is really good for that. 2 more Road of the Sacred Queen. You could probably, again, replace this either with another Morning Angel, another Yggdrasil's Grace, something. You could potentially do that. I just like being able to shut my opponent down for an entire turn. And then 1 last Interdimensional Escape to wipe my opponent's board, and that's it. So guys, let me know what you think of this Eldorado Flicker deck. This is by far not the most refined version of this deck. It was really just there to be fun and to be a little bit more on par with the Zeus Alice Palace package that Josh was playing. But let me know what you think down in the comment section down below. Are there things you would change? Are there things you would do differently? Are there things that you wish I would have done differently? That's totally okay too. This is just my version of the deck, and I, of course, don't have all of the ideas in the world, so I'm always willing to hear from you guys. Check out CCG Prime for singles and Odyssey Games for boxes of the new set coming out, Game of Gods. And with that, guys, this has been Paul. Catch you later.